Hey guys, it's Scully. Um, in this video, I wanted to talk about something that's very important, hopefully to a lot of people, especially myself, since it hits so close to home, not only for me, but for a lot of people I know. Um, but I wanted to take this moment today to talk about mental illness. As a lot of you know, mental illness is very, very common in our community. A lot of people have it. Probably people you don't even know have it. Some people, they just kind of keep it to themselves, live their day-to-day lives. No one really thinks a whole lot about it. Others, it's not that simple. It's very debilitating, and it interferes not only with things like relationships, but also day-to-day functioning. Sometimes even so much to the point that they may not even be able to hold down a job or do a lot of other things that, we tend to take for granted most days. But there's a lot of stigma around it, which is why bringing it up is a little complicated at times. But that's one of the things that I hope I can discuss a lot on this channel, because like I said, it's a very important topic. It's something I want people to feel comfortable to talk about, because it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just something that some people have to deal with, but it doesn't have to define who you are. People don't have to be ashamed of it. They don't have to be forced to keep it a secret. I think that they should be able to talk about it very comfortably without being criticized, because they have no control over it. So there are a lot of different types of mental illnesses. Depression being the most common. It can be environmental, or it can just be something that happens. And with other mood disorders like depression, there's also bipolar disorder, which, in all honesty, is the one I have. I wasn't really sure how to start that conversation, to be honest. But yeah, that one's a pretty interesting one. So those ones are more kind of mood related. There's also more anxiety-based disorders, like OCD is a pretty common one. Some people have, also known as obsessive compulsive disorder. Some people have anxiety just kind of by itself, like generalized anxiety disorder. It tends to be over a lot of different things. Yeah, that one's pretty overwhelming as well, speaking from personal experience. Yeah, there's some personality disorders as well, like borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, and some other ones. There's also disorders like schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder. Schizoaffective being more kind of a combination of bipolar and schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is usually its own thing. So, as you'd imagine, that one's pretty complicated. So yeah, and then there's ADD, ADHD, depending on which type you have, because there's a couple different types of that one. But yeah, there are a lot of different types. Some with a lot of very overlapping symptoms. Some people even have multiple mental disorders that they live with, like anxiety and depression being a very common one. There's also PTSD. I didn't mention either. That one's I can't imagine. That must be very difficult to live with. But that one, I feel like that one has quite a bit of stigma behind it. And I feel like with a lot of these people, they don't need to be judged. They just need support. They just need patience. They need understanding. Because these disorders, they're very debilitating. Living with them in general is very difficult. And it's even harder to face the real world when you know that if you try to be honest about, hey, I have this disorder, people are going to be like, whoa, what on earth is that? Rather than perhaps being as patient and understanding as they could be, if they took more time to be familiar with the topic and just even do their own research to some degree. Because honestly, things like this don't always take a ridiculous amount of research. They just take somebody who's willing to just kind of be patient with the person and work with them. And sometimes the best thing you can do is just listen, because people have a lot to say a lot of the times, especially right now. I'm no exception to that, of course. You can learn quite a bit about things that you spend time with and look into on your own, which sometimes topics like these are not only very complex in terms of just the amount of information, but also if you're just not familiar with them at all, it can seem very overwhelming to kind of just dive right into something like that. And it's easy to get very kind of overwhelmed with all of it. Heck, for people suffering from such conditions, it's very overwhelming as well. And one of the greatest things that we can do is just try our best for them. Like I said, you don't have to be an expert on the matter, but I really hope that if I don't know what the world's going to be like 50, 100, 200 years from now, but in my lifetime, I do hope that I can live long enough to see a lot of positive change in this world. People being more open-minded, more caring, have more compassion. Mental illness is one of the really big ones I hope to see a lot of positive change, because it's just so prevalent now, and to see so much fear around those kind of things is, truth be told, still kind of concerning, considering how common it is. I mean, it's probably about 1 out of every 3 people or something have it now. I mean, given that's just a number, but I don't know if that's the number, but it's pretty common now. And since 2020 hit and everything that's going on right now, I feared that this was something that was going to get a lot worse and even surface in people that had no prior history of it happening before. So one of the things I really wanted to promote on my channel was having the space to talk about something like this. And especially now, really checking up on your friends, whether it's the ones that you know for a fact have things like depression, anxiety, or the ones you don't hear from, because those could be the people hiding it the most. And we may not realize it in our busy day-to-day lives. You realize, hey, I haven't heard from them in a while. Let's see what they're up to. Well, sometimes those stories don't always end on a positive note. So with things like mental illness, I've feared that if people don't talk about it enough, that they may, well, for lack of a better term, take things into their own hands and do things that aren't very healthy. I'm sure we've all known at least one person in our lives that was truly struggling, and we didn't realize until it was too late. You can kind of catch my drift here. I don't want to upset anybody by going too deep into that, but that is something that I feel coincides very closely with mental illness. And another one I also feel like is very misunderstood, which sometimes coincides with mental illness as well, is addiction. Not everybody has experience with that, and it can be very difficult to deal with. So that is understandable, but that is also a lot more common than people realize. It's not always the stuff on the streets either. It can be just about anything can be addictive, like caffeine and cigarettes are a couple mild examples. Even things that you don't think about, like even gambling or spending large amounts of money, can be very addicting. Just about anything in excessive amounts can be. And yes, it can be some of the stuff on the streets too. So, I mean, I'm not trying to downplay that at all, because that stuff is obviously relevant too. but people tend to think only of that kind of stuff when they think about addiction. And that's another one that I feel like is even harder to talk about, but a lot of times I feel like that can start out as maybe somebody having a mental illness or somebody feeling isolated and separated from everybody else for whatever reason, feeling like they have nobody to talk to or open up to. So it's kind of easy to see how all this stuff it doesn't always have to be related, but it can be. It can start out as one thing and turn into something else. Somebody can have just one of these things, like just addiction or just depression, but nonetheless, they're all very important things to talk about. The people who are affected by this stuff, I mean, sometimes it's the person going through it, and sometimes it's their relatives, all of which have perfectly valid feelings about it. So I just challenge you during this difficult time to really kind of keep an eye out for your neighbors and stuff. Because sometimes people can look like they're holding it together and that they're perfectly fine. And sometimes it's because they're hiding it so well. So even your friends that seem okay, just try to check up on them and see how everything's going. Because life is so short, life is so precious. We all have a lot of very, very wonderful people in our lives, and we want to keep them very near and dear to our hearts. So, there's no worse feeling than realizing that somebody in your life who you cared about a lot is no longer in the picture. And maybe something could have changed, something could have stopped it. Maybe not. Either way, you never know, because unfortunately, like I said, they've come and gone. So always remember that during times like these, that people work the best together. Support is key. Everybody needs love. Everybody needs friends, family. We're meant to be sociable creatures. We're not meant to go through life alone. And there's nothing wrong with needing support. There's nothing wrong with reaching out for help. And if you or somebody else is struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Hopefully most people are not too far away. Facebook, click on their computer, cell phone number, texting. Never be afraid to reach out. And never ever feel like that you're a burden to somebody. Because this world is so precious with every single last one of us in it. We all need each other. And I need you wonderful people out there too. So stick around. See what this life has to offer you. Because you'd be surprised. Things can get better. Even in the darkest of times, there can be even just a little bit of hope, a little bit of light. And it's like I always say to my friends, the rainbow always comes after the storm, and the storm will pass. Until next time, Scully, I'll see you around.